What are the challenges for school library advocacy? What can we learn from the past? And how do we go forward? I'm Anita Kirkland, tackling these questions with this video and its sequel, Anita's Top 10 Action Advocacy Tips. To quote Barbara Stripling, for years, school librarians have pleaded, cajoled, publicized, and even demanded that administrators, teachers, parents, and school boards recognize the value of school libraries and support them accordingly. If no one has heard our pleas, then have we really made a sound? As ever, Stripling hits the nail on the head about our advocacy problem, and it's got some history, characterized here as the evolution of the soapbox. Once upon a time, advocacy was truly from the soapbox, the school libraries are good for you approach. As research and practice have matured, we've started to jump down off that soapbox to advocate with the evidence. With the confidence of that body of evidence and innovations in practice, it's time to throw that soapbox out altogether. To look forward, let's start by looking back at the evolution of school library advocacy approaches. Once upon a time, the school libraries are good for you approach was basically all we had. Not that long ago, really. The headline is from Ontario, but the trend was more universal. Hard economic times and a degree of anti-intellectualism fueled by the Back to Basics movement to the detriment of the frill programs like libraries and the arts. The emergence of the internet was turning the world of information on its heels, fueling the popular belief that libraries were on the road to extinction. Intuitively, we knew school libraries made a difference to students, but we needed the evidence. The early to mid-2000s saw a flurry of large-scale studies showing a strong correlation between school libraries and student achievement. Continuing research identified specific characteristics of effective school libraries. Higher scores on standardized tests are cited as the sole impact indicator. The research gives us little insight into specific strategies that have a positive impact on learning. In Ontario, Partners in Action, the last program guideline for school libraries published by the Ministry of Education, was already over 20 years old. New guidelines published by the Provincial School Library Association were often perceived as an add-on, leaving school librarians at a disadvantage when trying to initiate collaborations. National standards were very useful in setting output standards for things like collection size, budget, physical spaces, and staffing levels, but when it comes down to it, a great collection does not mean that learning is taking place. We knew what stuff we needed, but we could not articulate specific impacts on learning. Advocating for more money, more resources, more staff time put us on the soapbox. Pleading and demanding was often perceived as being self-serving. Even if stakeholders understood the reasoning behind the take our medicine, school libraries are good for you approach, didn't mean they were willing to take the advice. Clearly, it was time to jump down off that soapbox and advocate with evidence of the impact on learning. The message was loud and clear. Ross Todd, the evangelist of evidence-based practice, told us so in no uncertain terms. Dr. Todd connected us to the move to evidence-based practice that was becoming the mainstay in education and beyond. The focus shifted from what we had to what we did to improve student outcomes. Greater sophistication in assessment strategies provided us with tools for improving practice. We started to be able to answer that pesky question, but what is it that you actually do to improve student outcomes? And in Ontario, we were all over it. The Ontario School Library Association published its online toolkit for evidence-based practice. A new study looked at the characteristics of exemplary programs, and evidence-based practice has become embedded in education in the province, deepening our own professional knowledge and helping us to speak the same language as our colleagues. So much better than preaching to them from the soapbox. Clearly, we are no longer on the fringes of education looking in. The evidence is growing that school library programs and professionals have a positive impact on student learning. And as library advocacy guru Wendy Newman eloquently reminded us, Building relationships and communicating effectively are at the heart of effective advocacy. Her basic rules provide the mantra for effective advocacy. People do things for their reasons, not our reasons. Understand, respect, and address their reasons. Cultivate relationships of credibility and trust. The Ontario Library Association's VIP strategy epitomizes the approach and has enabled a strong relationship between leaders in the profession and decision makers. The relationships that OSLA has cultivated across stakeholder groups position effective school library programs as a positive advantage in moving the province's educational priorities forward. But it's not just up to the leaders to lead when it comes to advocacy, it's up to all of us. And a couple of my favorite school library gurus offer us great advice, starting with Blue Skunk blogger Doug Johnson. Johnson's first rule of advocacy: don't depend on national studies, statistics, or publications to make your local case. Be able to draw on them when needed, but understand the natural skepticism of local decision makers. Rule number 2, build relationships so others will advocate for you. As Johnson says, one parent telling the school board how important the library program is to his child is more important than a dozen brochures. Never advocate for libraries or the librarian, only for library users. After all, we exist for the users. Framing comments from the standpoint of the effect on the library sounds self-serving. Change that language from "the library needs a bigger budget" to "without an adequate budget, students will not have access to the newest Children's Choice Award titles and reading interest will decline." Yes, district-level library leaders may be at the table, but they represent one of many interests. They will do what they can, but don't imagine them as the superheroes with powers to change the situation at your school. And remember Barbara Stripling's characterization of our old soapbox strategies? Her 2014 article in American Libraries is a must-read for detailed advice on advocacy that actually works. And my own advocacy advice? It starts unequivocally with the premise that we all own it, across organizations and across the profession. And how do we do that? Find out on my second advocacy video, Anita's Top 10 Action Advocacy Tips, available on my website.